Hey, my friends, welcome into the Pulse, Metro Detroit's only nightly political talk show. I'm Roop Raj. You know what? We have a lot to get to tonight, including a national farewell to the man who was the longest living president. The tributes are pouring in for Jimmy Carter today, how he brought people together from different sides, and how he brought civility into the conversation. And speaking of civility, what about talks of unity in a very different way? You see, the expansion plans Donald Trump is touting for Canada, calling it the 51st state, perhaps, the Panama Canal and Greenland. He wants some big changes as far as U.S. footprint is concerned. We'll have a former Democratic lawmaker and local pastor and Trump supporter who knows Donald Trump well in studio tonight to offer up their views on if this is just Trump being Trump, or are these things actually possible policy points? We'll take a look at that coming up. Those stories in just a minute, but first, you've seen these pictures, just terrible. Devastation in California. The wildfires continue to torch the land. And you talk about the land, that's one thing. People's homes, livelihoods, histories, families destroyed, businesses gone, all in the Los Angeles area, the largest of which is known as the Palisades Fire. Thousands of firefighters are on the ground working to contain the flames, which were fanned by strong winds that are expected to return in the coming days. And from the air, they try to fight this as well. Tonight, tens of thousands of people are under evacuation orders. And meantime, the fires are setting an insurance crisis in motion that's happening right now. It's like a second disaster after State Farm canceled 72,000 policies last February, many of them homeowner policies. And the state's insurer called Fair Plan is set to be overwhelmed by, you guessed it, billions of bucks in claims in the coming days and weeks. It only has $700 million on hand right now to pay out some of the claims.
Sure, I'll feel differently in a few hours and tomorrow, and then try to reconcile how you rebuild your life, because after an event like this with such demolition, it's going to change the economics, it's going to change policies around insurance, and there's going to be a shortage of resources. So it's not like you can rebuild. The house that took us 3 years to build before, it's not going to be an overnight rebuild.
And as the fires keep burning, they're now set to be the costliest in the history of America. J.P. Morgan analysts pegging economic losses at $50 billion. That's actually double what it was just on Wednesday. Coming up later in the show, we're going to take a closer look at these fires and hear from a local battalion chief on the challenges crews there are facing, as well as former Fox 2 anchor Alan Lee, who just moved from Los Angeles back to Detroit. We'll be talking to them in just a matter of a few minutes here. And now to that final farewell to the country's 39th president, Mr. Jimmy Carter. A state funeral was held at the National Cathedral with family, friends, and many others in attendance. Speakers of that ceremony included Carter's grandson, President Biden, and Steve Ford, the son of former President Gerald Ford, who actually read remarks written by his father before his death back in 2006. You know, much of Carter's legacy was cemented after he left the White House. Mourners say he'll be remembered as a politician who put civility, kindness, and public service ahead of his own ambitions.
They were small town people who never forgot who they were and where they were from, no matter what happened in their lives. But I recognize that we are not here because he was just a regular guy.
President Carter parked politics at the Oval Office door to do what he believed was the right thing.
Jimmy Carter was 100 years old when he died on December 29th. He was the longest living president in U.S. history. After the funeral, President Carter was honored at the Baptist Church in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, where he taught Sunday school for decades. His final resting place is next to his wife, Rosalind, whom he was married to for 77 years. You know, today's funeral also brought together all former living presidents, as well as President-elect Trump, who sat next to former President Barack Obama for the ceremony in D.C. And if you see here, by the way, lip readers are having a field day with this. Beforehand, the two were seen talking and even smiling at one another. They sat in the same row as the Bushes and Clintons, with the Bidens and Vice President Harris and her husband in front of them. Everyone putting politics aside tonight to remember Mr. Carter. Well, turning now to other political news, Americans and people around the globe continuing to keep a really close eye on President-elect Trump's expansion plans for the U.S. We're calling them plans, theories. That includes Russia. They're paying attention. They're particularly interested in ideas for seizing Greenland. The Kremlin says it's monitoring that situation, saying the Arctic zone where Greenland is located is off of Russia's national and strategic interests. They are interested to know what will happen with this place, and they want to preserve things there. Now, earlier this week, Donald Trump said he could not rule out using military or economic force to take the Danish territory, as well as the Panama Canal, which the United States gave back to Panama back in 1979. They say they won't be giving up control. Now, we also talked about annexing Canada, making it part of the U.S.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who announced this week he'd be resigning, says, quote, "There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States." Those are the exact words he used. So we wanted to know what you thought of the expansion plans the president-elect has been talking about. Here now, a pulse check from around Metro Detroit.
I think that it is a absolutely terrible idea, and I think that we should keep our fingers out of everyone else's pies. I think we should mind our own business and worry about the problems that are happening on our own soil instead of trying to take over other countries.
My honest response to that is I don't think there's a shot the U.S. would actually invade Panama or Greenland. It's going to turn into a negotiation. That would be craziness, though. I'll say that.
We also posted the question on our website, fox2detroit.com. Right now, most of you say you oppose President-elect Trump's expansion plans for the U.S. And by the way, this is not a scientific poll. This is just something we put up there and got a little sample. As you see, 73% oppose it. Hey, if you don't agree or you agree, just weigh in. Use that QR code on your screen to vote in our poll. And coming up later in the show, we'll be sitting down with a local pastor, an outspoken Trump supporter who knows the next president well as a former Democratic state representative, to hear their thoughts on this topic. Still ahead tonight, all eyes on the West Coast as parts of California are torched by those wildfires. Coming up, we're hearing from a Metro Detroit fire expert about what crews out there are up against right now, as well as former Fox 2 anchor Alan Lee, because you know what? He just lived in California, came back to Detroit. What is it like from the standpoint of living there? The Pulse on Fox 2 is coming right back.
It looked apocalyptic.
A heartbreak. Yeah, we were supposed to have a wedding here actually Monday.
All right, you heard him say that wedding, that church where the wedding was set to happen, one of thousands of structures that are gone, destroyed by these wildfires in California. You know, the largest one you've heard about is called the Palisades wildfire. Several people have died, in fact, more than 5 reported because of these different fires. Right now, thousands of firefighters are trying their best to put this out. Tens of thousands of people are under evacuation orders. These fires are set to be the costliest in U.S. history. Joining us now to talk more about these fires, we're talking about Fire Chief Robert Jennison from the Livonia Fire Department and former Fox 2 anchor and author Alan Lee, who lived in L.A. for so many years, of course, was here, went to California, and is now back here in Detroit. We thank you both for joining us here tonight.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Alan, we'll begin with you because you have firsthand knowledge. First of all, our thoughts are with all of the people that are your friends and neighbors. How are your people doing out in Cali?
Well, I have a very good friend who actually had a house on the other side of PCH, on the ocean side. And talked to him the day of that it started. And I just said, just watching what's going on, and I just want to send you some prayers that hopefully your house is going to be okay. And he goes, so far, early in that day, he said, it looks good. We're not worried about it right now, but we're cautiously watching. Got a text from him later in the evening, I think our house is gone.
Oh,
totally. And
that quickly.
Which is so weird because the Palisades it's an area, Pacific Palisades is on the sort of the northern side of PCH. So it kind of rises and keeps going up. And on the other side of the PCH, you pretty much have Malibu, and you have Santa Monica, and you have that lower flat. It's kind of really shocking that the fire would jump the highway there to get to you have a house on the ocean. You kind of figure
you're safe,
okay, but it destroyed a lot of them, and it just happened to be one of them. So sad.
How far away? And I know there's all kinds of you got the big movie actors who live in some of these houses, and then we saw some people in the smaller houses and seniors and regular everyday people. Talk about where you lived in that mix.
Well, we lived in a couple of places. Once we lived in Tustin, which was in Orange County. We dealt with fire once before where it was 3 miles away.
Wow.
And we had to get an evacuation order. And the scary thing about that, and I'm sure he'll talk about this too, when you get wind involved, those ashes just get carried. And they can go for miles and miles and miles. And everywhere you would look, there would be ash on your car, ash on your roof. So it was so easy for things to just blow towards you. And you couldn't be miles away. And you go, well, I could smell the smoke and the fire, but I don't see it. And next thing you know, your stuff is on fire.
And it changes quickly by the day and by the hour, right? I mean, really.
By the hour. And they deal with this thing called Santa Ana winds all the time in California. And if you've never experienced it, it is winds that can be anywhere from 30 to 70 miles an hour on any given week. And it happens, and those things are scary in their own right. You throw in the fact that you are now dealing with fires and all that stuff. And I think that was one of the problems. They couldn't get planes in the air or helicopters to help put the fire out, to help the ground crews, because the wind was blowing so hard. So they couldn't go up in the air.
And that's the one.
The ground crews were like, well, there's nothing we can do at this point in time, and the fire just keeps rapidly moving. And California's kind of I mean, Los Angeles area is kind of you have pockets, like Palisades is a pocket here. It's next to Santa Monica. Malibu is below it. And then you have a lot of mountain area where it's very foresty and it's a lot of woods. And then you go over the top of the hill, which the fire was starting to reach now, which is Calabasas. Then you have to really go up. And then when you get to Calabasas, there really is only one major road that takes you up. It's not even really a highway. It's kind of like a 2-lane road. And so if you get stuck in there, you really are starting to count your blessings.
And Chief, we're here in an area that we're not used to hearing about all these different terrains that California has, and so it's hard for us to understand and relate. It's also hard for us to understand about these Santa Ana winds. Some of these upwards of close to hurricane force winds carrying ashes. Talk about winds. I would imagine as a firefighter, you would say that's like the worst enemy of a fire is wind, right?
Yeah, wind-driven fires are definitely dangerous, and we've seen them happen here in Michigan, even though we don't have the Santa Ana type winds. Maybe not the 100-mile-an-hour type winds, but when we get storm force winds here, 30, 40, 50-mile-an-hour winds, it drives fire. It can pick up embers, ash, drive it through an entire neighborhood, start more places on fire. We've had instances that happened in the city of Livonia. About 2017, we had multiple fires that resulted from power lines that went down, then the winds kicked up, push the fire to other places. It happened here in the city of Detroit also. A
very mini version of what they're dealing with in this devastated area. But let's talk about seasons for a moment, because, you know, we talk about dry seasons and wet seasons, and we know in California, and Alan, you probably know this better than anybody, it's been a heck of a dry time. And talk about how that affects how quickly a fire spreads.
Yeah, so for the last couple years, it's been pretty wet out there, correct? So that has just caused the undergrowth to grow more and blossom bigger. And now this last year, with less than 1% of what they normally see at this time of the year, and it has dried everything out. Add the Santa Ana winds, dries it out even more, and now you just have nothing but tinder there waiting for anything to start it on fire.
If the winds die down, and that happens in the next few days, what kind of an advantage and upper hand will firefighters have? And is there a water issue as well?
Well, I've been watching the reports, and I don't know that there's a water issue as far as the system, but when you have as many fires as you have and as many firefighters, thousands of firefighters attempting to fight these fires, and they all open hydrants at the same time, the water pressure is going to drop. I don't know if you have a system that could ever survive that.
You hear a lot of criticism to the governor there, Gavin Newsom, you know, President-elect Trump, talking about this. Everything becomes political. Right. When you look at how this is being run right now, just as a former California resident, what's your take?
My take is they are being challenged. It's not just the Palisades fire. That's the issue. There's also the Sunset fire, which is in the Hollywood Hills that's going on. And you also have the Hearst fire. You have, you know, all these things are just the Eaton fire. They have the resources are just like everywhere that you have to deal with. And for some people, like in the Palisades, for some people who say, oh, they're going to just take care of the rich, they're going to take care of the rich, most of those homes are devastated. So, and it's because you couldn't get to them to help it. And so you just had to just let them burn. It's just nothing we can do.
One thing you keep hearing, people, you know, you say people live by the ocean. There are others, because they're, in many populated areas, are building out closer to vegetation, closer to trees, closer to woods. Yeah. Have you noticed that in the last few years?
A little bit, you know, but like I said, land is so precious in California. It's not cheap. That's a whole other issue. So you're going to move farther and farther out to get a better deal. rather than live LA proper. You know, it's just way cheaper, more bang for your buck,
sure,
farther out. The second part of this problem is really going to happen with what you're seeing right now is, and they deal with this all the time, is if it does start to rain heavily. Because now you're going to have a bunch of mudslides. All that ash is going to get gathered up as well. And you're going to talk about a whole different situation.
Chief, we have about 15 seconds left. Talk about that mudslide issue. That's something you've understood and studied.
Yeah, absolutely. When there is nothing there to stop the mud, the vegetation, it's gone. They're going to have a lot of problems out there once those rains do come.
We pray, and that's all we can do oftentimes, and we try through some charitable efforts to help people so many hundreds of miles away, but we just think about all of your friends out in California, and we all think about those victims who are dealing with that. Thank you, Chief, for joining us. Thank you, Alan. Welcome back to Fox 2. It's good to see you under these lights.
To be back.
You know, but we should mention, by the way, that the Rams game is being moved from California, as you can imagine, to Arizona because of this terrible fire. And you better believe that the announcers will be talking about California quite a bit during that game, as they well should. We're 11 days away from the inauguration, and Donald Trump has a lot of plans for his presidency, including expanding the U.S. by trying to make Canada the 51st state. We have local experts weighing in on the other side of the break. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. All right, welcome back to The Pulse, where we focus on all things people, power, and politics. And in this next topic, all three of those subjects are involved: people, power, and politics. President Trump looking to make Canada, the people there, a part of the United States. He also talked about seizing Greenland and the Panama Canal. Joining us tonight on the Pulse is Detroit pastor Lorenzo Sewell, who is a supporter of Donald Trump and who knows Donald Trump, and former Democratic State Representative Leslie Lovin. It's good to see both of you. Thanks for joining us here tonight on The Pulse. All right, so ladies first, we'll begin with you, Leslie. Canada, 51st state. Greenland, you're ours. Your thoughts on some of President-elect Trump's ideas as he's talked about them?
Well, thank you for having me, Ruth.
Of course.
Before I answer that, I want to just acknowledge President Jimmy Carter.
Of course.
And laying him to rest today. It was the first president that I remembered, and I don't think it's ironic that the peace president is the one who was laying in state in the Capitol right before this inauguration, as we talk about these kind of inflammatory comments of annexing Canada to be our 51st state. I think that type of language is kind of, it sounds, this president kind of sounds like an old white gangster rapper when he speaks like that. And it's not cute. It's not funny. I think it really puts language out there that just seems kind of thuggery, you know, and not very presidential.
We should mention real quickly, since you mentioned Carter's funeral, there was a very poignant moment where Barack Obama and Donald Trump exchanged laughs, jokes, glances, and words. And by the way, the lip readers are having a field day trying to figure out what it is that was said. But talking about civility, do you think, Pastor Sewell, you went to the convention, you saw Donald Trump, you've met with him, you've prayed with him. When you look at these statements, is that someone who's bringing civility into international politics, or is that something else to you?
You know, most people are apolitical and most people are ahistorical, so most people don't understand this isn't a new idea, right?
Sure.
In terms of policies, we know that Americans have died for Canadians, Canadians have died for Americans, but in terms of vision, I want to follow a leader that can paint a picture of the future that's able to create passion. What about America first? Yes, if Trudeau doesn't want tariffs, then why shouldn't we think about an idea, right, of what it would look like for a 51st state?
Well, if we just simply, and by the way, you're right, because if you look at history, the Revolutionary War, the Americans went and invaded Quebec and said, we want to take Canada. And I think it was the War of 1812, where again, Americans went and said, we'd like to annex Canada. When you look at history, Leslie Love, do you think that it's safe to say that many people just call everything Trumpian when in fact he's playing from a playbook often that has been played before, including getting rid of the Department of Education that Reagan talked about before? These aren't new ideas, right?
So, no, they're not new ideas, but we have to take into context the character and the conversation of this incoming president over the course of his campaign. And so a lot of things have been brought forward that have made people very upset, fearful, unsure. Other nations are looking at us. We have a world that there are two active wars happening right now. And so to say we're looking at taking in the country and the way he does it, you know, it's not just what you do, but how you do a thing. And and the way he does it is tactless. It's not like a statesman. It's very much like we coming in and, you know, some people are very attracted to this kind of machismo, but it's not productive, not right now.
Pastor
We're
Sewell,
in a different place in society.
He ran the campaign using that the Trump campaign, the rally energy that he had. Sure. It's time to run the country. Do you think he can dial it back and maybe be a little more diplomatic about some of these ideas?
Well, this was a diplomatic statement. Remember, this was a response to Trudeau, and we have to be intellectually honest, right? With the same country that's invested billions of dollars in Ukraine and in Gaza, why not think about expanding so that our own national security, right, whether it be protection from Russia, whether it be a 51st state, or even the Panama Canal that charges us insane amount of money, why not we think differently about America first?
What about Greenland, though? They're talking about, Trump is talking about acquiring Greenland and then saying we're going to punish Denmark if you get involved by using tariffs. It seems like the #1 tool in the toolbox right now for America will be the tariff. Is that an appropriate way to rule?
Well, we got to negotiate, right? When we talk about our president, he's our leader who God put there, who we're called to pray for and believe that God's going to use him to be able to make sure that America can be first.
Leslie?
Okay. So 25% tariffs on Canada, for example, and having worked in the auto supply industry, knowing our relationship with our partners to the north, knowing our relationship with Mexico, we have really these close ties in business and employment and jobs. These have rippling effects. And so while it is a tool that we can use, just to throw it out there like that, it's reckless. And it's not responsible. It's not responsible talk. And by the way, there's a Congress that we send there that really moves this forward. He can set the agenda, but it's the people that we elect to serve in those seats in Congress.
I talked to Congresswoman Debbie Dingell today, who said that if he wants to do any of this, you'll have to go through Congress, of course, who has a Republican majority right now. But Ms. Love, I want to ask you one last question. When you look at the tariff situation and you see what Biden did as the president, he brought back into his presidency Trump-era tariffs and believed that those were in place for good reason. Do you then think that they're also bad ideas if Trump imposes them, or do you think that Biden got it right by bringing those in?
Again, it is a tool that you use. It's not a threat. You know, and again, it's the way you do a thing sometimes. And this way was very threatening. It wasn't, this is a tool that we can use and we're going to negotiate, and this is the benefit to America when we do this, and this is the benefit to our partners to the north and our partners to the south. And how does that impact all of business that we do, all of our international commerce in the United States? And so it is in the method that's the problem here. I don't mind us using all the tools we have at our resource, but come on.
I'll tell you what, my parents, I love you both. You're in your 70s. You don't change much of your personality in terms of how you do things. And some people are saying this is just Trump's way of doing things, but he's going to have to go through Congress to get a lot of work done. And Pastor, you know that, and Leslie, you know that too. And some people are happy about that. Some people not so much. Leslie Love, Pastor Sewell, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on The Pulse. If there's a topic you'd like to see covered on this show, we have a question or some feedback, remember, you can always get in touch with me. Use that QR code at the bottom of your screen and send me an email. I'm Roop Raj. Have a good night. Thank you both for joining us here.